Good morning. I'm chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. And we called this press conference today to make sure that America understands the role that the Congressional Black Caucus has played in the two bills that we are shortly probably going to vote on, the reconciliation package and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. But what's important today for you to know, as we stand here today as leaders in the caucus, joined by the Democratic caucus chair with us is Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. We also come with a lot of history. We stand on that foundation. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, a member of the executive board of the Congressional Black Caucus and of this group, the senior, with seniority. We are also joined by the second vice president and chair of the Women's Caucus, Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence. We also are very honored to have many of our chairs of prominent committees, starting with our very own Gregory Meeks, who is chair of Foreign Affairs and has had a long history of being in the battle of negotiating budgets, along with Danny Davis, who understands the plight of the fight. Congresswoman Robin Kelly, who leads our Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust. And we're also joined by a host of other members, including our chair of our Housing Committee, Congressman Emanuel Cleaver. And so many more who are here, and you'll hear them respond to questions. And we will be led by our very own first vice chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Stephen Horsford, who after a few brief moments of comments from me, I'll turn it over to Stephen. But let me just say for us, this week has been impactful. Yesterday, many of us went to the White House to talk with executive team members to the President of the United States. We also then engaged in a full dialogue with President Biden. It was very clear that they understood, because this was not our first meeting, and I want everybody to understand, in the last 2 months, we have been more than a half dozen times before executive members, including former Ambassador Susan Rice, former Congressman Cedric Richmond, senior advisor to the President, head of their legislative team, yesterday joined by the acting budget director and a host of other people, and yes, President Biden came in and had a full dialogue with us. And the reason this is important is because when you look at the Congressional Black Caucus represents 17 million Black Americans and 80 million Americans. But let's look at the issues, the disparities, and what we're fighting for in these two bills. We've been at the table. While it's not a perfect ending, it is a lot of progress. And some of the most investments that have been made in our communities will happen because of members of the Congressional Black Caucus. We're not there yet, but shortly we will be there. And we will see many of our priorities there. We will see many of the investments that we have been fighting for and working for and leading at the top of that list. I'm not going to give you a priority list, but I'll give you a teaser, and I'll say we'll be very pleased that housing and vouchers will be on that list. We'll be very pleased that HBCUs, Alma Adams is standing here with us, who is the chair of our HBCU caucus. And you'll see great progress there. You'll see child care, child's tax credit. You'll see coverage for more seniors and individuals with Medicaid. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first vice chair, Congressman Stephen Horsford.
Good morning. I'm Stephen Horsford, and I'm proud to represent Nevada's 4th Congressional District, which includes 52,000 square miles from Las Vegas and North Las Vegas to 6 rural counties throughout Nevada. I'm proud to be here with our esteemed Chairwoman Joyce Beatty and my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus as we use our power and our message to work for the progress for Black families, children, workers, and small businesses, and all Americans. Over the last several months, the House has worked tirelessly to put forward a package that will deliver for Black families by expanding paid leave, putting high-quality child care within reach of every family, lowering the cost of health care, and rebuilding our economy in a fair and more equitable way. One of the most transformative parts of this package is the expanded child tax credit, which is a historic investment in child welfare. And I want to commend all of my colleagues with the Congressional Black Caucus because this was actually one of the first issues we brought up with President Biden and Vice President Harris when our chairwoman took us in to meet with them to talk about our priorities during this 118th Congress. We know the expanded child tax credit has already cut child poverty nearly in half, lifting millions of Black children and families out of poverty. In the months after the first child tax credit payment went out, the number of Black families who didn't have enough to eat dropped by 25%. 25%. That is real progress. The child tax credit has put food on our tables and pumped money into our communities and with small businesses when they needed it the most. Last month, Keon, who is a young father in my district, wrote to me about the impact of the child tax credit on his family. He said with the extra money he is receiving each month, Keon's family can now buy his daughter healthy food and the other things that she needs to grow up strong. He wrote, and I quote, "It may be $300, but in the end, it's help that we're most grateful for." Today, families like Keon's are counting on Congress to act. They're not asking us to means test the child tax credit or add more layers of bureaucracy. They're asking us to build a future where no child goes to bed hungry, where middle-class families get the tax cuts that they deserve, and that's what Democrats do when we're in the majority. 4 years ago, Republicans used their majority to pass huge tax cuts for the very wealthy and for big corporations. Well, now with Democrats in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, we're delivering for American families. And with the Build Back Better Act, we can make transformative investments in jobs while cutting taxes for middle-class families, investing in housing, health care, and most importantly, in people. We can give every child the chance to thrive no matter what they look like or where they grow up. To me, that's worth every single penny. So Chairwoman Beatty, I want to thank you and every single member of the Congressional Black Caucus who has worked tirelessly to get us to this point. We are on the cusp of major success for the American people. This is our power, our message, and we will deliver the change that Black families deserve and need. And I yield back to the Chairwoman.
Thank you so much. It was so important for us to start off that way because we know we don't live in a perfect world. And we know that we're not a monolith. But we have pushed from all ends to get us at a good starting place for America. With that, I'd like to yield to Congresswoman Robin Kelly, then we'll go to Congressman Greg Mee.
Thank you, Chairwoman Beatty, and good morning, everyone. As chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust, it has been my focus throughout this reconciliation process to ensure that we are acting intentionally to improve health equity for Black Americans. I'm thrilled to say we are going to do just that. The healthcare needs of our communities has been left unaddressed for many generations. Lack of access, unaffordable health care, implicit bias, disinvestment, and structural racism are all barriers to care for Black Americans. We are going to change that with the Build Back Better Act. Through any inequities in access and disparities in both treatment and outcomes have existed for hundreds of years, the COVID-19 crisis has exposed these issues for the world to see. The bright light cast upon these injustices by the pandemic cannot be ignored. We have an incredible opportunity to transform the way our communities access health care, and we must take this opportunity to save lives. As we rebuild and strengthen our nation's healthcare system, our policies must center on equity and justice for Black Americans. Our solutions to correct inequities must not only consider communities of color, but prioritize them. That is why we must build back better by expanding coverage, making health care more affordable, increasing investments in our fight against the maternal health crisis, and ensuring seniors have the coverage that they deserve. One of the biggest injustices our communities are facing is lack of access to affordable health care. More than 60% of the millions of Americans living without health care coverage are people of color. Black Americans are overrepresented in this group. CBC is working to bring coverage to the folks who don't have health care, so we must fight for them. We are also working to expand coverage under the ACA and to make permanent the enhanced ACA marketplace help we brought forth in the American Rescue Plan. These changes have lowered monthly premiums and out-of-pocket costs for so many Americans. We need to make sure this continues as the nation carries on our battle against the COVID-19 pandemic. We're working to make sure seniors get access to important care, like dental coverage. Dental care is so expensive without insurance that it is the #1 medical service that people in America skip because of the cost. 71% of Black Medicare beneficiaries went without a dental visit in the past year, compared to 43% of white beneficiaries. 20% of rural seniors have not seen a dentist in more than 5 years. It is completely unacceptable and cannot go unaddressed. The maternal mortality crisis is disproportionately killing Black mothers. Experts agree the Build Back Better Act should include 1 year of postpartum Medicaid coverage for new mothers. This is an important step forward in preventing complications and maternal deaths occurring in that critical year postpartum. This policy will be transformational for women's health care. We are also going to invest in growing and diversifying the maternal health workforce, addressing the social determinants of maternal health, and increasing data collection on maternal mortality and morbidity. Moms can't wait. The Build Back Better Act will improve access to care, create more affordable care coverage options, close the health coverage gap, expand benefits for seniors, invest in addressing the Black maternal health crisis, and it will save lives. Members of this caucus members of this caucus under the leadership of Chairwoman Joyce Beatty have been instrumental in keeping these policies and so many others in the bill. We are going to get this done. Black Americans are counting on us. Thank you.
I want to thank the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Joyce Beatty, for being the conductor, organizing and bringing us all together so that we can make sure that the issues that are important to Black America are pushed to the forefront. Members of the Congressional Black Caucus, my colleagues here, when you look at this Build Back Better bill, you're seeing the inclusion of Black Americans like you've never seen before. Why? The leadership of Joyce Beatty, but then look at the work on education led by Chairman Bobby Scott. When we look about and think about infrastructure in regards to communications, etc., look at the work that was done by the Honorable Eddie Bernice Johnson as Chair of Science and Technology. And when you think about making sure that you got a roof over your head and you can also live and continue to have the American dream, think about the work of Maxine Waters as chair of the Financial Services Committee. So I also sit on the Financial Services Committee, and I see the chair of the Housing Subcommittee here. And for so many years, we haven't heard anything about housing or investment in housing. And we know that if you don't have a house over your head, it is hard for you to learn. It is hard for you to success. So in this Build It Back Better bill, one of the prime focuses is housing, all types of housing. Now, I'm a product of public housing. And finally, what we're looking at is making sure that we're investing in public housing for so many people who do not have that opportunity. Vouchers. So people who don't have any money to pay their rent, finally we're talking about investing and putting money into housing vouchers so people have a roof over their head. This has not been part of the dialogue or conversation, and I've been in Congress for a long time until this Congress, this administration, this president, and the leadership of the Congressional Black Caucus. Now, I know Chairman Cleaver. You'll hear from him in a second. And he will tell you about how children cannot be educated if they don't have a house to go to. He will tell you that also if you're talking about creating wealth, because in this bill, we're also trying to help individuals earn and get a down payment so they can earn and build and have a home to help create wealth in the communities. This would not have happened. These inclusions would not be a part of Build It Back Better if it wasn't for the leadership of Joyce Beatty as chair of the CBC and the leadership of members of the CBC, particularly our chairs. So this is only the beginning. It's the CBC that has made Build It Back Better issues that we have been fighting for, taking dreams of individuals and making it become reality. That's what this bill is about. We're going to get it across the finish line, and it's going to make it better for Black Americans. In fact, by doing that, we're making it better for all Americans.
Thank you so much. Mr. Cleaver, did you have anything else you want to add to that statement as chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just say that it was a blessing for me to receive the support to become the chair of Housing and Insurance. But one of the blessings that I think many Americans don't realize is that we have people who lived in public housing who are on our committee, not just Representative Meeks, but Steve Lynch and myself. And I think that when the president took the oath of office, he must have made some commitments to himself. The first meeting that I had after we came back after the insurrection of January 6th was with the president and members of the Senate to talk about housing. And the president made a commitment in the Oval that day about not retreating from housing. We are not getting away from that ridiculous policy in HUD where we only do one-for-one replacement. In other words, if a hurricane hits New Orleans, I know specifically and experientially about this, we'll only replace what the hurricane washed away. One-for-one replacement. That's gone. We now have money to do a 3-generation backlog of updating public housing and vouchers, which is desperately needed. We haven't increased the vouchers substantially since Lyndon Johnson. So this housing issue is important, and it matters. It really matters to have people who've been there and who understand the problems they face. And I'm excited about the first generational assistance or assistance for first generational home buyers who would not otherwise have a chance to buy a home. But they'll set the standard for what Congressman Meeks said earlier about the generational help in building wealth. Thank you, Madam Chair, for bringing us together.
Thank you. Before we conclude and take a few questions, thank you, Congressman Cleaver. It made me think when you said saving lives about something else that's important, and we know this especially as Black parents. Lead in the water for children. Saving our children. That should be a single reason that we should support this bill. When we talk about it from the stand of being educators, activists, fighting for our families, far too long we know how devastating that has been. And so while we were going to end, I think it's important for me to ask Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence, who hails from Michigan, and we know the eyes of America, how we looked at Michigan when you were a part of that in bringing that forward. Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence, we'll close this out.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Joyce Beatty for her amazing leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, I was on the front seat of the catastrophe of lead poisoning in our community. A whole community, a city, was poisoned by lead because of the lack of investment. We know we've kicked the can down the road too long, but I tell people a pothole in the street is an inconvenience. Water is a necessity for life, and we have too many communities. We're struggling still to bring Flint back. We now have Benton Harbor, Hamtramck, and even some in Detroit, and across this country where there is lead in the pipes, and lead poisoning affects the brain development of our children. This is not something that is optional, and we'll get to it. We know that we must replace and have our drinking water, which is a necessity to life, clean, safe, and affordable. So this, to me, is so fundamentally the right thing to do, and the Black Caucus know environmental injustice plays out so strong in our communities, communities of minorities, the poor, black and brown people. So this issue of fixing water is a paramount concern and a victory, I feel, for our country as we move forward. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, and as we open up, let me just say I'd be remiss if I did not say, as we leave here today, we will go into our Congressional Black Caucus meeting. We're known for all the things we've talked about, but also what we didn't say today, I'm going to say it. We're still fighting for voting rights and the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. And today, Tamir Rice's mother will join us after leaving the Department of Justice. Thank you, Congressman Jamal Bowman, for bringing that to our attention, and she will tell her story to us today. Another reason we have to continue to hold press conferences to let America know we are not on the sidelines as members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Thank you.
Ms. Beatty?
Yes.
Good morning, thank you. Madam
Good
Chair.
morning.
Good to see you. You said in your remarks here, you dropped a pearl there.
Thank you.
Uh,
Things are jumping off the shelf.
Supply chain issues, right? You said we're not a monolith. You said that, this is not a perfect ending, but it's a lot of progress. We keep hearing that there are still some democratic divides here that need to be resolved. How deep are those divides, and are you also frustrated with trying to get information at this stage about what is in and out of the bill? And you know what's in and out of it.
Well, I can speak to the Congressional Black Caucus. I think I also said we push from both ends to make progress. And that's the way Congress and policy works. We connect people, policies, and politics. You're always frustrated when you're in a leadership position. But to answer your question more directly, I feel good about where we are today. Did it take longer than I wanted to get this close? Yes. But am I pleased that we, as members of the Congressional Black Caucus, have had input? Yes. I can't speak to the Senate directly in relationship with what they're doing and what they're bringing to the table or not, but here's what I can tell you. After listening to the President of the United States yesterday, he was very clear that what he's bringing to us is not a bill with two senators or a bill with this. He's bringing the President's plan to the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House will do her job and bring a Build Back Better plan to the House for a vote. And it is that point we will have conversations and talk about the value of what's in it. You just heard. We're going to save thousands of lives for children and black children. We're going to take people off the street and give them housing. More money in housing than we have had in the history of this Congress. We're going to get a child tax credit. We're going to have child care. We're going to get more money into HBCUs than we've had in the history of this Congress. And that's because people on this stage have pushed from both ends. Now, is it perfect? You've been around covering us for a long time, and you know we don't live in a perfect world, and we're not going to give you a perfect answer. But I'm going to give you another P, and it's called progress. Next question.
Madam Chair.
And we'll go here and then here.
Thanks, Chairwoman Beatty. You said just under 2 weeks ago in a statement after meeting with President Biden, quote, "I made it clear to President Biden the needs of black families are not being perceived as a top priority for the administration." It's been less than 2 weeks. What promises have you received to make you feel better?
Well, I felt better because that night after I carried the message back from the members, we started having another meeting. I mean, we weren't at the table in the way we felt we should be. And so I was always taught you don't complain about something unless you have a resolve. So my complaint, and it was substantiated by the White House's administration's pollsters, that was number 8 on their slide, from people like us saying, we don't believe our priorities are being heard by the administration. President Biden sat at the head of that table with me and said that will change. Within 3 days later, his senior advisor came and talked to the entire Congressional Black Caucus. We had a family dialogue. As a result of some of the direct questions, housing, child care, more coverage for Medicaid, we don't know to what extent those things were or were not in there, but I can tell you yesterday, after leaving the White House with that team and the president himself, we've made great progress. So I think our voices, and that's why we're here today, because our voices are being heard.
Thank you.
So you talk about dialogue, that usually goes both ways. What's the president asking from the CBC as they try to land this overall package?
I think you hear my folks back here. He wants us to vote for the Build Back Better plan. But more importantly on that, there wasn't a direct ask. Obviously, we support the president. The president was very clear that it was more the other way, that he needed to demonstrate to us, and he said this publicly, that because of the work of South Carolina Congressman Jim Clyburn, a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, the number of black people who came out and voted in our districts, because of the issues that we bring forth, whether we're agreeing with one another or not, it's all of how progress happens. You don't get there because everybody agrees on day one. You get to progress because you have bold people standing up here saying they disagree, or they don't like something, or it's not enough. But what we are now trying to come together for the issues that affect every one of these districts. We have people from the East Coast. Housing is very different there than it is in the Midwest with me or in the South. So I had to fight for the extent of the highest end to make sure that people are covered in New York with housing, just as they are in the Midwest or the South. Okay, we'll take a couple more, and if other members have comments they'd like to make, please feel free. Plastic and others. Yes.
Senator Schumer today says that the bill isn't within arm's reach. Would the Congressional Black Caucus agree with that characterization? And I know
That it is or isn't?
is in
Yes.
arm's reach. I know you guys have articulated specific policy points, including some that Congresswoman Kelly has articulated about the omnibus. Are those still outlying priorities that are not included in this bill? And I know there's also discussion about moving forward with the bipartisan legislation without the reconciliation plan. Is that at all an option?
So the first three are yes, yes, and yes. The better answer is we're going to pass 2 bills. And we're almost there. We do believe that a vote, I'll say it strongly, we want a vote to come to the table. We want to make sure that America, and especially black Americans, know that we're not just talking about this, that we're about saving lives. And whether it is 1.7 or $2 trillion, that is a significant amount of investments in our communities. Okay, last question. I can't see, so we'll go to the back of the room.
Just to piggyback on the infrastructure, obviously the caucus met ahead of the infrastructure vote, or what was supposed to be the infrastructure vote last month, and supported a delay. Do you support a delay this time?
Well, I don't think we're in a position to keep kicking the can down the road. You know, infrastructure is very important, and we need to make sure that we meet the deadline that is imminent. Anybody else have a comment they want to make on that? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that is still outlined, that hasn't been yet.
There was a PMC meeting this morning, as far as we know, it's still in.